stand broke. Very sad. It's been with me for a couple of years. Meet Chris Weitz.
Hey, Dave.
So I'm just going to dive right in. We're going to talk about how you got started. You have a brother. It's also in the industry.
I do have a brother, 4 years older than me, and we started writing together. So before we ever figured we were going to be directors, we started writing in New York, came out here about 20 years ago now.
And you grew up in New York?
Grew up in New York.
Went to college in?
Well, I went to college in England. I went to high school and college in England, and then came back. Neither of us really knew what we were going to do after that. I'd studied English literature, and I don't know what kind of job I thought I was going to get with my degree. My brother was writing plays in New York, and that's not the road to career stability either.
Right.
So we started writing screenplays together, and I think that the big break that we got was writing Ants, which was an animated movie with Woody Allen playing an ant. And after that, we were kind of our sort of career.
Your mother was an actress.
Yeah.
And your dad was a fashion designer.
Yeah.
Did that kind of help your brother start off writing plays? Was it because it was in the family?
No. Well, it's funny. I have my family is kind of a movie family, but there's a big sort of disconnect between when my mom stopped acting,
right.
And she had a terrific career and was nominated for an Academy Award, won 2 Golden Globes, and all that kind of movie stuff. But then when my brother and I started writing movies, I mean, Hollywood forgets, the film industry forgets things very quickly. So all that stuff is kind of out the window. We were kind of starting from scratch. The good thing was that it didn't seem such a bizarre thing to contemplate having a career in movies.
Right.
Because my mom had done it.
Right.
Because my grandma had been an actress, my grandfather was an agent, and so we sort of had that in the back of our minds.
So New York to London. How did you get to LA? What made you get here?
It was kind of becoming obvious that it would be handy to be out here, because we'd fly out here for meetings and things, and then having flown out here would be very, very stressful. Much more so than if we were just driving 30 minutes. When you fly thousands of miles to go and try to pitch some stupid idea that nobody's going to like, the weight is much bigger. So it was kind of an obvious move.
I know it's a little warm in here. If somebody wants to jump up and open those windows or crack them. Somebody came in here and shot something and put these little balance things in, and now they don't open away. So sorry, it's a little warm in here. So after you moved here, how long did it take for you to sell Ants?
About 7 years. I mean, we were trying to sell various scripts that, spec scripts, basically. And we were doing rewrites on various things. There's a kind of for a while, you can write stuff and not get credits and still be employed to do it. And that's kind of a great place to be because you're being paid to write. It's also kind of a weird limbo because you're really not getting your stuff shot, and that's very, very frustrating. But it was 7 years of hard work, and I really owe it to my brother because he's very disciplined, and I'm very indisciplined. He kind of kept me in line.
Did you have any of the weird Hollywood jobs that when you first moved out here, or did you just...
Yeah, no, well, not the kind of...
celebrity dog walker? Or
No, we already had some assignments when we moved out. So we were kind of keeping body and soul together, writing. There were weird screenwriting jobs. I mean, our first sort of serious job was a production rewrite on a very Brady sequel. And it was really quite bizarre. You know, production rewrite is when something's about to get made and everyone's panicking about whether it's going to work or not. And so there we were. We were on the sequel to the Brady Bunch movie, which of course had to be made. And yeah, people needed more. But we were happy just to be, you know, we could order in as much sushi as we wanted to at lunchtime. Actually, they told us after a while to stop ordering so much. So it had its ups and downs.
So, Ants happened, and that was the big, everybody in town sits up and goes, okay, what's next?
Yeah, people really liked the script, so that was great. And that was quite a lot of work, because making an animated film takes about 2.5 years, at least the way that they did it then, and it was one of the early CG feature animated films. And it was a lot of working back and forth with storyboard artists and things that are really to do specifically with the animation process, which is that, you know, a normal feature, you can shoot it consecutively, but you've only got one lead actor. Essentially, with an animated film, it's like you have clones of the lead actor. So people can be working on 20 different sequences at once, which means that you're writing and rewriting on the fly for all of these sequences. So it's a strange kind of working process. The good thing was that it gave us a feel for how movies are put together visually, and that kind of helped us when we got a chance to direct American Pie, which I feel strange talking about in a church context.
Hung shot here, you're good.
Okay.
How did you go from that to American Pie? Like, you're doing the animated thing, so now you're going to direct this, with a cast that you launched all of these careers with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, essentially, you should take the first directing job as available to you. So it wasn't like we were dying to do a team sex comedy. Once we took that job on, we wanted to do the best job we could with it and to infuse it with as much kind of heart and compassion as possible, given the sort of formula of the genre. But basically, it's the first time anybody gave us that chance. I to this day don't really know how we got that job, because we didn't write the screenplay. We'd never directed a film before.
No shorts, no nothing.
No shorts. So we were just, I suppose, very convincing when we sat down in the room. And that was largely because we had nothing to lose. We could say whatever we wanted to. Because we knew we weren't going to get the job anyway.
Wow.
And then we did.
And then you went from that to, which came next, Nutty Professor or...
Oh God, Nutty Professor is one of those things that I keep on wishing they would take off my... on TV. Well, it's just, you know, and now that I'm really classy and making movies about immigration.
Well, but that's what's interesting, because Eddie Murphy, he creates these characters, and then you're brought in, it's like, great, tell the story.
Yeah.
I imagine that would be slightly intimidating.
It would have been normally, except that at that stage, Eddie Murphy was in such a kind of superstar, strange orbit of his own that we really never talked to him. So we were just doing a rewrite, similar as it were to the rewrite on the very Brady sequel, and we were happy to have the work at the time. But that was just kind of another step in moving forward, really. I think what was the next big step? The next big step would have been, well, About a Boy was the next big change for us, which was that, and what happened was we had made a second film, Down to Earth, which did well, but sort of felt that we hadn't really moved forward kind of artistically, to employ a somewhat pretentious term. It was a funny movie, and it was a good movie, but we wanted to do something different for our third film, and I read this book, which was fantastic, and we got a chance to kind of reinvent ourselves. We went away to London and lived there for a year, and essentially made an English film.
I thought that you were British. For some reason, in my head, you were always British because of that.
Well, the really great thing was hearing somebody at a test screening say, "This is a great British film." You know, and the fact is, I had gone to high school and college in England, so I sort of understood the kind of social setting the language, and it wasn't such a strange fit as you'd think.
And you were nominated for the Oscar for screenplay.
Yeah, which was amazing, really exciting. Has never happened again. But they haven't withdrawn it, which is good. No, that was a really, really wonderful time, because I think it was a really good example of of doing something just with a conviction that it could be good and for its own reasons. And really, when you think about it, sort of, we wrote this film about an English guy and an English kid and his depressed English mom, and there was nothing indicating that would come to the attention of the Academy, and so it was really great for that to happen. It was a tremendous surprise, and we got to go to lots of great parties.
Did you have a relationship with Hugh Grant before that, or was that your first?
We didn't have a relationship with Hugh Grant. I'd always thought it was really funny, and then we got along really, really well. Our first meeting, there used to be a restaurant on Highland and I think Melrose. What was the name of it? Anyway, so we met him there, and it turned out to have been within about 3 blocks of where he'd been arrested for soliciting prostitution. And he said, "Thank you so much for making this reservation, reminding me of my recent past." And we kind of got along like a house on fire from there. He's a really funny, intelligent guy, and we're still friends, which is great.
So you had, and going back a touch, so you did Fantasy Island.
Yep.
And then you did Off Center, which
Yep.
is a show that you created, and Sean McGuire.
Mm-hmm.
Very funny, very British. Again, I thought you were British.
Yeah, when I left Cambridge, or when I graduated and came back to New York, which is where I'm from, I lived with a friend from college, Ewan, and the dynamic was basically that he was very charming and good-looking and happy, and I was very neurotic and spoken for and self-questioning, and so I just turned that into a TV show.
It's great.
Yeah.
And it was a funny little show.
It was a funny
great.
show. I think it was the funniest and least successful show in network history.
Thoughts?
It was the WB, which became the CW.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah. I don't understand these sort of when companies seem to swallow and merge with one another like amoebas.
And now I want to jump ahead to Lone Star. So, what are your feelings on television? If somebody were to come to you with a television show tomorrow, or if you were to go, are you pitching television? Which do you?
My feelings on television is that right now it's where the best writing is to be found. It's where the most interesting stories are being told. It's where the deepest characters are being portrayed, and that it's got a huge leg up on film at the moment, which makes me sad, because at heart I'm a big screen enthusiast and would rather be making movies, but I think there's a really strong argument for a good writer to go to TV now.
Mm-hmm. So then, after, this is around 2002, there's a big jump, you did a lot of producing. Documentaries, Dylan's Run, and then also we had American Wedding, See This Movie, Cracking Up, In Good Company, and American Dream Scale with Hugh Grant.
Yep.
And
yeah, a lot of that, a lot of those things you just mentioned are my brother's directing, and I'm sort of, I think it's called a vanity credit.
Oh, vanity producing.
I'm not a very good producer. There's some things that I've produced and taken a hand in that I'm really proud of, like Single Man, Tom Ford movie. His debut was really terrific. And
what was your involvement with that from the beginning?
Tom and I are friends, and he had a producer on the movie who was a famous producer whose name I won't mention, but he decided that she was completely nuts. And he decided that I was relatively not nuts by comparison, and said, "Would you like to produce this?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." And so I had a bit of input on the script, which was already very good, and a bit of input on casting. And Nick Holt from About a Boy played in Single Man, and Colin Firth was in it, which was tremendously gratifying. He was nominated, which was great for him, but especially for that character as well, to be recognized. But I'm not the guy who knows how much it costs to get a particular crane for a week.
Right.
Then again, there are lots and lots of very talented people who can do that kind of thing. So,
what is your gift in producing then?
Many people would say I don't have one. Well, I think that if I've been fortunate and spent a lot of time on casting and who are right for particular roles. And something that can be useful is convincing studios who can be very sort of shaky about their decisions that somebody is right, even though they're not necessarily as well known as somebody else. That doesn't always work, but I think that, especially in the casting of young people, my brother and I have been really successful in as much as the actors have been good. Mm-hmm. And I think that in terms of working on scripts as well, there's a tremendous compulsion towards formula, which one has to recognize, and in a sense you have to be conscious of those requirements, but to try to avoid cliche as much as possible. And I would hope that people would say that those are our strengths, mm-hmm. but it's not for me to say.
It seems like, especially a Single Man, mm-hmm. It's such a quiet little intimate movie. You can almost feel how that movie was made. It obviously was a low budget mm-hmm. film, mm-hmm. and jumping ahead then to Golden Compass, mm-hmm.
which is huge. Well,
craft service budget for Golden Compass.
Probably, yeah. I mean, so Single Man's a very an indie. In 2004, I went off to make Golden Compass because I loved the books upon which the film was based. In many ways, well, I can tell it was a mistake or eventually a really good decision of mine to do that movie because it was huge. I had every single resource at my disposal that I would want to. The problem that comes along with that is when somebody's spending $200 million on a movie, they want to make that money back. They're not in the business of making, the most expensive art film ever, or even the most faithful version of the book, because they don't necessarily have faith in that notion of the movie making its money back. So, during shooting, everything was great, and I could order up anything I wanted to get things done. And then during post-production, which is when you're editing together the film and doing the music and all these kinds of things, which is also especially complicated for a CGI film because that's when half of the movie is actually getting done. It's when you're doing all your effects. Things kind of got much more complicated because the studio was starting to worry. And eventually I was kind of pushed out of the editing room. So the version of the film that people see is not the version that I intended.
Going back to the beginning of this, mm-hmm. you were originally signed to do it.
And then I quit.
You quit.
I quit because I sort of felt, oh, this is a bit too much for me. I'm going insane. Because a film, even a small film, can be very demanding on you physically and mentally. I mean, you're working 12 to 16 hours a day, and the pressures can be kind of quite intense. Which is not to say it isn't, it doesn't beat a real job any day. But I did have a sense that this was going to be an incredibly complicated process. As it turned out, I was worried about the wrong things. I was actually able to sort of get the shooting done, but the politics of when so many millions are involved was greater than I could manage. Basically, I wasn't cut out for it. Which is to say, I sort of mean that in a good way, I think, which is that I wasn't really ready to play such hardball over the result.
But the writer implored you, and is that what is that?
Oh well, Philip Pullman, asked me to come back when the guy who had stepped in for me had been fired, and and Philip is a hero. So amongst other reasons, that was one of the reasons that I came back.
And there's a story. Peter Jackson invited you to
New Zealand to look at his facilities. They were making King Kong at the time.
King Kong.
Yeah, and I started to get a sense of what was going to be involved in shooting something that size. They were very, very decent rate comments. I mean, Peter Jackson essentially owns New Zealand at the moment. You arrive at the airport and you're at customs and you see big pictures of Gollum and things in the background, much like you would have the president when you arrive in LAX. But that was a real eye-opener in terms of just understanding that it wasn't going to be shooting people in a room and knowing that that's what you're going to go away with. In fact, you're making an animated movie and a feature movie at the same time, which is it's tough.
And when you go into your first day on set and it's either a green screen or there's a vast nothingness there. Mm-hmm. Do you go in and focus directly on the actor and then trust that the visual people around you are going to make that happen?
Yeah.
Having never done that before, what is that first day like?
It can be really daunting, but you sort of done all these dry runs, which have to do with storyboarding and testing effects and planning things out. And I had complete confidence in the people who were doing the effects, who were incredibly talented. So my job was kind of to deal with the actors, but also to make sure that when the effects came through, they were as kind of humanistic as possible. Because I think that although you can do a lot of amazing things with CG nowadays, a lot of it is about things blowing up and robots and it's about who can make the biggest explosion in some cases, and this was much more about whether you can render these imaginary characters in as human a way as possible.
So, producing credit, one of my favorite movies, Nick Nora's playlist. How do you, and then Single Man, Lone Star, you get a phone call that they want you for a little vampire movie.
Yeah.
Were you afraid for your life when you got the phone call? Knowing the fandom that's out there, and the enormity of the first.
I didn't really understand the fan aspect of it.
How quickly did you learn?
Pretty quickly. Because, of course, when I agreed to do it, I mean, a lot of my career was before Twitter, before these kind of ways to gauge people, like public reaction instantly. And of course, the instant headline that people come up with is American Pie director to direct second Twilight movie. And of course, this freaked out a lot of young women. And there was a lot of skepticism. But I also find that the fans of those particular books are enthusiasts more than they are kind of, if you talk about the fans of, say, the Avengers or something like that, those are fanboys and they criticize every single possible decision. And I think that the only problem I've had with the fans of Twilight is, why did I change Edward's car from slate gray or silver to black?
Why did you?
Because Volvo gave us money. I tried once or twice to say it's because this is a much darker film, and it's the emotionality of it. But really, when when you're making a movie, you're thinking, God, we don't have the money for an extra day in Italy to shoot this sequence, and then Volvo is going to give you money for your production. You sort of you sum things up and think, well, I would rather shoot the Italian sequence as well as possible and deal with the huge consequences of silver carving black.
So that was a Summit film.
Yep.
And Summit produced A Better Life.
Yes.
Is that what helped you? We spoke a little bit briefly about this. This is such a fascinating story because, again, in my head, you were British until yesterday. And I was like, "What is this British guy doing this Latin movie?"
Yeah.
And
my entire career is based upon making people think I've done weird choices in filmmaking.
And you've done successfully from.
So far, yeah. I hope I keep on getting to do that, but. Yeah, so I was talking about Italy. I was on the set in Montepulciano, and the town was getting more and more populated with teenage girls every day. So much so that on the last day of shooting, I couldn't go to the bathroom because I would want to stop in at a cafe just to use their bathroom, but it would be clogged with fans. And, God bless them, but they all wanted a picture, mainly because I once touched Rob Pattinson. They wanted me to arrange assignations with him or hand him a letter that he needed to have. And so there's a rather surreal environment, and we're up in this beautiful Italian hill town, and they serve cakes for breakfast and all kinds of wonderful, strange things like that. And I had this script about an undocumented immigrant, and I sort of slipped it to the guys at Summit, and they said, "We want to make this movie," and I said, "I'm not going to do another vampire movie, so this is not this is not the one for me, one for them kind of thing." And I said, "Yeah, no, it's no problem. We love this script," which was great. And I think in part they're a little high on the fact that they felt that New Moon was going to do really well. But they also really liked the movie.
Go ahead, just touch. So if you tell them that you're not doing another vampire movie, were they slightly freaked out by that?
No, I don't think so.
Knowing that you had a good thing going with the first one, or with what you were working on?
I think that they would have been very happy if we kept on doing it.
And you didn't do the second one because?
Well, technically I was doing the second one, not the third one.
The next.
Oh, that's only, I don't want to get in trouble with Twihards by claiming.
Right.
It's true, Jeff.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that I would go completely nuts if I had to make another movie about vampires. Which is not to say that I hadn't enjoyed the process, but I too, like an audience, want to sustain my suspension of disbelief. And there was only so much worrying I could do about whether Edward's skin would sparkle in sunlight well enough, and the sort of details of that effect, whether Bella should be with a vampire or a werewolf and that kind of thing. So I was pretty sort of straight with him from the beginning. And frankly, I think that the next film became much more sort of action intense in terms of the storyline, and I'm much better at people kind of being depressed and sad and kind of moving around, and not very good at having people punch each other and fights between vampires where they're throwing each other in the air and that kind of thing. So it was a good fit for David Slade in the third one. So then it was.
So then
LA.
You're in LA, and interesting producing credit on this, Jamie Gertz, Lost Boys and Twister.
Yeah.
And she had just started her production company.
Yeah, she just started a production company. Summit thought that there was a certain number at which the movie should be made. By number, I mean amount of money. It's like I'm falling into Hollywood jargon. They wanted to spend a certain amount on it, and that's based upon whether they think they can make their money back. And I thought that in order to make it look the way that I wanted it to, we needed more. We needed not just look the way that I wanted to, but for it to feel the way that I wanted to, which is to say, with money you're buying extra shooting days. With extra shooting days you're buying some freedom for your actors to experiment. You're not constantly pressing them to get the performance out immediately. We ended up having 69 different locations throughout the city, so we shot 38 days, which is largely a result of the fact that Jamie Gertz and Lime Orchard Company came in and were able to up our budget.
How many days did they want you to shoot it for?
Well, they won't dictate a certain number of days, but they will by telling you what budget number has to come in at, you know, something has to give. And that's eventually shooting days. You end up cutting a day knowing that that's going to bring you down to the budget where you're supposed to be. As it was, I made sure that we came in under budget because we essentially had no music budget until we realized how under budget we were. So getting Ellis on the Display and getting the soundtrack that we had was a result of economies during shooting. But having 38 days meant that we could go to 69 different locations throughout the city and really give Demian, and even more importantly, Jose, who's playing his son, the time to do what they needed to do. Demian is used to, because he, you know, according to him in Mexico, you get 1, 2, 3 takes maybe, and then you're moving on. But here we were able to really flesh scenes out.
And you got child labor laws too.
That too, yeah.
Wow, that's a tight shoot.
It is a tight shoot, and you end up trying to kind of dance between the raindrops so that so that Jose is getting his schooling in, and you're shooting in the right period of time, and just making sure somehow that it all works, which is very talented ADs and line producers who work that stuff out.
When you brought Damien in, you brought him in for another movie first.
For New Moon, yeah, because I knew I was going to make this movie, which was then called The Gardener, and I had seen him in Che, the Steven Soderbergh film, and I thought he was great. I really wanted the part to be played by a Mexican actor, which is to say, somebody like Benicio del Toro or Javier Bardem. They are great actors. Javier Bardem is Spanish, Benicio del Toro is Puerto Rican. It's not just a matter of accent, but also a matter of presenting to part of the audience the notion that a Mexican actor can do this role. Not only can he do this role, but he can excel in this role. And so he came in to read for the chief vampire baddie in New Moon. And I just really never saw him for that part, but it was an opportunity to get to know him. And he was a bit confused because I started talking about The Gardener with him, and he thought I was talking about the vampire character. I didn't know where to go with it at first. You know, Demian's a big star in Mexico, and he's an exceptional actor, and that's been one of the sort of really wonderful experiences in my career is working with him.
It's amazing when you see, and you know this actor, he's on Weeds, and he's right now in Savages, and as a day worker, it's just, I would not have pegged him to play this brilliantly quiet day worker. It's amazing.
It's it was really gratifying. You know, his character on Weeds is very kind of suave and corrupt. His character in Savages is a different kind of corruption. This character is extraordinarily stoic and a very, very good man, very complex, but doesn't really say very much until the very end of the film. Demian's one of these guys who can carry the camera. You want to see, you want to watch him, even if he's not saying anything. That's a very rare quality. And he really immersed himself in the role. It was extraordinary to see him change into that person.
Did you feel like you were on vacation shooting that movie compared to the Golden Compass?
I think the stresses are kind of different. With Golden Compass or New Moon, there are logistical problems that you always have to sort out. Here, yeah, you're moving around. The stress is to get the very best that you can of these moments and make them feel absolutely real. And the bar isn't set as high for a fantasy movie, obviously. So the question is really, how are you going to portray this relationship between a 16-year-old kid who grew up in East LA and his dad appropriately? And that can be very, very tough to figure out.
And you don't speak Spanish, or do you?
I didn't speak Spanish at the beginning of the process, and I started, as I was going to pre-production, I started taking lessons. And now I speak enough Spanish to, can understand everything that's going on in that film. I eventually did interviews in Spanish, which I think they felt they were interviewing a very clever 3-year-old, basically. That's sort of how it sounded. And I keep studying Spanish. One of the great things about doing the movie was an excuse to start learning the second most important. Well, I wouldn't even say most important. It's the second most spoken language in Los Angeles. It's almost 50% Spanish speaking in our city. But
did you have a script supervisor who spoke Spanish? Because I imagine you're watching the monitor and you don't speak the language. It's like, okay, they're done talking. Great, cut.
Well, I mean, of course, by then I know every single line of dialogue, or I should. However, I wanted to cut loose the actors so that they could speak in a way that a Mexican character of that particular background would speak, and that's not always necessarily what's there in black and white in the script. Yes, I mean, we had basically a bilingual crew. Our script supervisor was Puerto Rican, AD Puerto Rican, Javier Cerobe, our amazing DP, is Spanish. So we had people from all over the Spanish-speaking world working on film, and also from East LA, which is really fantastic, because a lot of people were working on a film that they could understand from their own experience.
Did you have a lot of support from the community?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the East LA scenes were shot in Ramona Gardens, which is one of the last housing projects in LA. A lot of housing projects are being converted now. But in order to be able to shoot there, we had to be cleared with the community, with the official sort of community board itself. But also, we wanted to make the best impression that we could, and to really show people that we were going to portray them in a non-exploitative manner. And we had a lot of help from the people in Ramona Gardens, a lot of help with kids from Legacy LA, which is an after-school program. We ran the script by young people who were able to say, well, I wouldn't say that here. That's not the right bit of jargon. That's not the right swear word. That's not the right term for marijuana. That's not the right term for the police. And also from Homeboy Industries, who were incredibly helpful just in getting to know a bit about gang culture, a bit about what it's like to sort of face those choices. But also, eventually the gang members in the movie are ex-gang members from Hollywood Industries, because they just knew how to be better than the actors who would otherwise be portraying them.
So what are you doing next?
I will, in terms of... I'm happy to talk about it. I don't know what I'm directing next. I always sort of try to take each film as though if this were the last film, I would be okay with it, which is part of the reason for doing Better Life. Right now I'm writing Cinderella for Disney, which is going to be a live action, just in order to keep on sort of confusing people as to what I'm doing. It's a live action Cinderella, which is it's not Kung Fu Cinderella or High School Cinderella or Sassy Cinderella. It's the fairy tale. And that's for Mark Romanek, who's a great director, and I think it's going to be a very beautiful film. And I'm also doing something about the 1936 Olympic rowing team from the U.S., which is, I've never really written a period piece, so that's kind of fun. That's what I'm up to.
All right, questions?
Do you see yourself doing something as lighthearted as American Pie, or do you feel in a Better Life more presents your true self as a director?
I think the thing, what I think now about making films is that you're committing a year of your life, and it often takes you to the point of, or me, to the point of mental collapse. So the idea right now of doing something lighthearted seems to be in contradiction with that, which is to say, I think there are directors who just keep on working. Like Soderbergh's a great idea of that. He can make films of all different kinds. He clearly loves to do it from moment to moment. Whenever I sort of contemplate doing a movie, it's kind of like I said, it's if this is the last one, will that be fine? Right now, I think that Better Life is closer to what appeals to me. And in part it's because I've got a kid, I'm getting a bit older, and it's hard to imagine making a film, say, about teenagers trying to lose their virginity. It just doesn't seem appropriate. No, I think the next thing would probably be a drama. I'm not sure about that, but that seems to be the way I'm headed.
Anyone else?
I just want to say first, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
But I also wanted to ask, the film scene, Better Life, seems really influenced by Bicycle Thief.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you sort of patterned Better Life after, or is it something that sort of came later in the writing process?
Eric Easton wrote the version of the script that I ended up making. Actually, there have been many versions of the script over 20 years before this got made. Eric Easton, to me, he's a brilliant writer and the guy who got this made. And he definitely patterned it after Bicycle Thieves. That being said, the last thing I wanted to do before going into shooting was to watch Bicycle Thieves like on the eve of shooting, because that's one of the greatest movies ever made. I didn't want it to be in my head, because then we'd make a decision either to be like it or to be unlike it. I did watch a lot of Italian neo-realist movies. Umberto D. and The Children of Washing are probably the ones that have the closest bearing on the film. And it is kind of a neo-realist film in a lot of ways.